Our next speaker is Larissa Serdukova, and Larissa, the floor is yours.
Today I will present two closely related research areas. The first concerns the concept the stochastic Bayesian of attraction, which we developed to better understand metastability in system affected by random perturbation. And second part introduces a new geometric earlier warning indicator for predicting transition and ecological systems before they undergo an abrupt change. Although these two topics may appear different at first, they are connected by common question. How can we quantify the stability of system when randomness plays an essential role? Many natural systems, especially in climate ecology, can remain in one stable state for a very long time and then suddenly switch to another state because of an environmental fluctuation. Understand this rare transition is important not only from mathematical perspective, but also for practical applications such as predicting ecosystem collapse or climate tipping events. During this talk, I will explain how probability theory, stochastic differential equation, and geometric concepts can be combined to better understand such a phenomenon. Let me briefly introduce structure of my presentation. This talk consists of two main parts. In the first part, I will introduce the concept of stochastic Bayesian of attraction, or SBA, we call. After explaining the general idea, I will illustrate its use in the Amazonian vegetation model, that is one of the tipping points, where the main question is how environmental noise affects the stability of the forest. In the second part, I will move to a different ecological approach and perspective involving Arctic under ice plankton blooms. These blooms can develop very rapidly, and predicting them important challenge. I will show why traditional earlier warning signal based on the time, scales, and statistics often insufficient in this situation. Then I will introduce our new geometric indicator, which is based on the stochastic separatrix and commuter function. Finally, I will demonstrate this in geometric quantity in closely related to main first passage time, providing a direct connection between geometry of stochastic system and time required for a such transition. Several talks touch such a phenomenon, metastability, and I will give my definition of metastable phenomena. Metastability is a phenomenon that appears in many areas of science. Metastable state is a state that seems stable over a long period of time, but it is not permanently stable. Eventually, random fluctuation can derive a system toward another state. Examples can be found in chemistry, physics, biology, ecology, and climate science. In climate science, for example, different circulation regimes, vegetation states, the ice configurations may all behave in metastable state. The challenge is these transitions are usually rare events. This motivates the development of theoretical tools that explicitly induce stochastic effect in deterministic notion of stability. Our research focus on developing such tools, allowing us to describe not only where stable state is located, but also how likely the system is to escape from the states. Our goal is to better understand stability in noisy climate and ecological systems. To achieve this, we first need to refine what we mean by a Bayesian of attraction when randomness is present. Having introduced the motivation, I will now move to the first scientific part of this talk. Here we will explain the concept of stochastic Bayesian of attraction. In deterministic dynamical system, Bayesian of attraction are well defined because every trajectories follow a unique path. However, when stochastic perturbations are introduced, trajectories become random. And the classical definition is no longer sufficient. This motivates a probabilistic definition of stability. So, let us begin with the basic idea first. Then you see this picture, the formulas. Let intuitive perception, I will give intuitive perception of idea. What does it mean, stochastic Bayesian of attraction? This concept of stochastic Bayesian of attraction is one of the main ideas developed in our earlier work. It was in 2017 when I finished my PhD. In deterministic systems, the Bayesian of attraction consists of all initial conditions that eventually converge to a given equilibrium. Once the random perturbations are added, this picture changes completely. Starting from the same initial condition to different realization of the stochastic process may end up in different attractors. Therefore, instead of asking whether a trajectory reaches a particular equilibrium, we ask a probabilistic question. What is the probability that the system escapes from one region and reaches another region? This leads naturally to concept of escape probabilities. Rather than defining a sharp deterministic boundary, we define regions where the escape probability remains sufficiently small. Exists probability of escape, but it will be small. We are remaining initial condition close to the attractor that has a small probability to escape. These regions represent states that are still considered stable despite the persistence of the stochastic perturbation. In other words, stability becomes a probabilistic property rather than absolute one. The probabilistic viewpoint provides a much richer description of metastable state and will later serves as a foundation for geometric earlier warning indicators that I will introduce for the second part of the talk. In deterministic dynamical system, a Bayesian attractor is relatively easy to define. The initial condition belongs to exactly one attractor, and Bayesian boundary separates this region. However, this picture changes completely when the stochastic perturbation persists. Because of randomness, fluctuation, trajectories can escape for one state or another state. And here is the question. How likely is to leave the neighborhood of one of the attractors? And here you can see we define the stochastic Bayesian of attraction but by introducing two criteria. First criterion is give us the first threshold that identifies points where probability of escape remains sufficiently small. These points from the forms the core of the stochastic basin. Second criteria considers the trajectory that have already left the region and measures the probability that they return. It means that small probability to escape deterministic basin of attraction, we are joining the initial condition that starting with this initial condition, small probability to escape, once we determine such a shape that will be different from deterministic basin, we add or make union from the points with high probability to return to basin of attraction. It will be shaped. We have first deterministic shape, then third criteria is shaping our first stochastic basin of attraction, and then we have another addition for such a point when we have high probability to return to such attraction. And here, in terms, we have two definitions for the basin of attraction for Brownian motion and Levy case. Here, and of course, it will be different because we don't have a Levy flight discontinuous path and can jump is not passing through the boundary, but this target sets, and here the definition. But if you want to look for the definition, I will give you a paper published, and here two adapted definitions for the stochastic basin of attractions.
Larissa, can we clarify one point?
Yeah.
You're talking about stochastic basin of attraction of what? A deterministic attractor?
Yeah, we started with deterministic.
So
with
stochastic
deterministic attraction.
Stochastic basin of attraction of a deterministic attractor.
Deterministic attraction.
Because otherwise, I would like to ask, what is an attractor?
Yeah, invariant measure with deterministic attractor. Small noise intensity, everything is small noise intensity.
Thank you.
Yeah, deterministic.
And sorry, one more clarifying question, if you don't mind. On what time scale are you talking about remaining or leaving?
It's exactly the second part of we are joining geometry with time, with time scale. It will be in second part when we introduce earlier warning indicators. We give a formula, we give dependency, we prove a dependency. What is the connection between geometry of metastable phenomena and time scales? Okay. Of course, once we define stability through probabilities, the next question is how these probabilities can actually be computed. These escape probabilities are not estimated simply by Monte Carlo simulation. Instead, they satisfy a boundary value problem associated with stochastic dynamical systems. More specifically, the escape probability solves an equation involving the generator of stochastic process. You can think of generator as stochastic analog of the vector field in deterministic system. It combines two effects, and here is the formula of generator. The first is deterministic drift, which describes the average motion of the system. The second is the stochastic diffusion, or in the case of Levy noise, also the jump component, which represents the random perturbation. The escape probability is then obtained by solving this equation, which carefully chosen boundary condition. These boundary conditions simply express two possibilities. If the trajectory reaches the target region, the probability is 1. If it reaches another region instead, the probability is 0. Although the equation shown on this slide may look complicated, the underlying idea is actually quite simple. We transform a deterministic stochastic, we transform a difficult stochastic problem into deterministic. You can see here it's deterministic value problem, deterministic boundary value problem that can be solved numerically, numerical solution for this one. Once the escape probabilities are known, they immediately provide quantitative information about the stability of attractor. This probabilistic framework will later repeatedly used for our second part of talk to establish earlier warning indicators through the commuter function and match such a geometric approach to the time scales. Before introducing the new geometric indicator, let me first show how this framework applied to a real ecological problems as an Amazonian vegetation model. We calculate here and we learned how stochastic basin of attraction quantifies the metastable state as a forest state or savanna state. Exactly. Our first application concerns for the Amazon and the rainforest state. This picture appears several times in several talks in this workshop, and more one time I will show the same picture that connects tipping elements of the Earth system, and right now focusing on the Amazon and how Amazon related for, because I think we had a talk about amok, about ice sheet, but not someone who touch Amazonian rainforest. The Amazon plays a crucial role in the global climate system. It regulates the carbon cycle, influences the atmospheric circulation, and supports one of the richest ecosystems of the Earth. However, increasing drought, deforestation, and climate change raise an important question. How stable is the Amazon forest under increasing environmental variability? From the perspective of dynamical system, this becomes a question about metastability. Can the forest remain in its current state despite random perturbations, or it is approaching a threshold toward the savanna-like ecosystem? This application provided an idea testing ground for the stochastic basin concept that we theoretically introduced. Instead of only identifying the location of equilibria, we want to quantify how resilient the forest is to stochastic perturbation. In other words, we want to measure not only where the system is, but also how difficult is it for random fluctuation to push it to another stable state, that is savanna state. To answer this question, we first need a mathematical model, equations, our equation describing the vegetation dynamics. And here, if you can see exactly, Professor Chris is smiling because here his topic that is discontinuous right hand side, we have discontinuous point exactly, and this how after my PhD I find my postdoc position with Rachel Tusky in Georgia Tech, and how I met Professor Chris to see all of this non-smooth bifurcation, that is gradient bifurcation and whatever, but it was not climate, it was vibro impact system energy harvesting. We did application in vibro impact system. It was really 4 articles published and wonderful. I love, when you are step dynamical system, when you are step right, when you are step just name non-smooth, but it's involved completely. General is idea, yes, but we have totally different bifurcation, totally different behavior of the system, and too much to investigate. And even objective, it was come to Georgia Tech, and explore stochastic, non-smooth stochastic dynamical system, but I spent 2 years, 3 years just to looking for deterministic bifurcation and behavior such a system, because it's really very interesting. You are researching some part and then questions is growing. But yeah, here we have right hand side discontinuous, and here is the equations.
Can I ask, is G constant held, or is it seasonally?
It's constant. It's constant. Yeah, it's constant. Yeah, here you see the model we used, a conceptual vegetation model proposed by Mensk and co-authors. The variable x represents the fraction of forest cover. The dynamics are intentionally simple because the objective is not to reproduce the ecological processes, but to capture essential mechanisms responsible for the tipping behavior. This model contains two competing processes. The first is the forest growth. As long as the forest cover remains above a critical threshold that we mentioned here, capital X critical, vegetation grows accordingly to a logistic type law. The second process represents forest loss. Below the critical threshold, regeneration becomes impossible, and the vegetation declines toward the deforest state. As a result, the model poses two stable equilibrium. One corresponds to a healthy forest state, and other corresponds to a degraded savanna state. These two states are separated by critical threshold, that discontinuous threshold. You will see jump in between these two vector fields. When environmental conditions deteriorated, the forest equilibrium eventually disappears, producing a sudden and potentially irreversible transition. This stable structure makes the model an excellent example for studying metastability and stochastic transitions. The geometry of this model helps us understand why this transition can be so abrupt. Not just we have here discontinuity in the vector field, and then you will see that we model such an environmental noise by Levy noise, that is the jump process. Let's go here. This figure illustrates the quantitative behavior of the model. On the left, you can see the vector field together with the corresponding potential landscape. Of course, this this we have, and you can see in here we have what we call critical threshold, and we have here discontinuity in the vector field. The valley of potential is the red, represents stable states, while the hill between them represents the barrier separating the two attractors. As long as the system remains inside of one valley, it is relatively stable. However, random perturbation can occasionally provide enough energy to cross the barrier and enters to another state. This is precisely the mechanism behind the metastable phenomena. And in the right-hand side, you can see that here is the deterministic system. When we are starting from the initial condition in one of the basins of attraction, we start, it will attract, it will remain close to the attractor, Question here arises in this point. We don't have if what is happened if we exactly start our initial condition on the discontinuity, on the critical, if X initial condition is start here. Start here, we don't have uniqueness of solution. Question about uniqueness of solution. We have, as it was mentioned in the talk of the Professor Chris, that here we have exactly the repelling sliding mood. Here is non-unique. If we start initial condition from critical transition, we have three solutions. One toward the one stable state, another to another stable state. It will be forever here, three solutions. And it's called repelling sliding mode. Interesting question for us, for mathematicians, before apply all of machinery of stochastic differential equation and add noise. I have to most of the findings and results in stochastic dynamical system for well-posed deterministic dynamical system when we are adding noise. Here I have somehow to deal with such a discontinuity. What we will do? Of course, in my 2017, I was PhD student, I choose the easier way to deal with such discontinuity. What I did? Smoothness. This method called modification. I modified. What does it mean? Modification, I introduced the Gaussian modifier, Gaussian function, and what before to show this formula, what I did, I smoothed this. I introduced some stable point. In such an ugly discontinuous vector field, it was by modification frame one unstable point. It doesn't change the dynamic of the system because we still have our two stable points, but it's in trick to apply all of existing theory in stochastic dynamical system for the well-posed problem. And here you can see with different parameter, theta parameter, it's steeper or it's a region of unstable points, it's basin of such unstable point, it shrinks or increases in stable point. You can see. Okay. Everything right now, our system in between such two discontinuous vector fields, I have such an ugly expression that represent modifier. Yeah, two parts. They modify the fourth drift, second drift, and plus. And right now, everything is smooth, nice, and doesn't change my physical behavior of the system. But right now, I can apply all machinery for the stochastic dynamical system. And here we add Levin noise. Why Levin noise? Because Levin noise is more representative for an environment uncertainty quantification. Yeah, and here you can see stochastic differential equation from our deterministic one. Let me discuss a little bit more why we add the Levin noise. In natural ecosystem and ecosystem constantly affected by a random perturbation. These include drought, fire, storms, many other extreme climatic events. Such perturbations are often not well represented by random Gaussian noise because they may involve sudden and relatively large changes. For this reason, we introduced Levin noise into the model. Unlike Brownian motion, Levin process allows for discontinuous jump in the path These jumps provide a natural mathematical description of rare but significant environmental events. The stochastic differential equation shown in the slide combines smooth, right now, deterministic vegetation dynamics with this random perturbation. And here you can see parameter epsilon controls intensity of stochastic forcing, while parameter alpha determines characteristic of Levy process. Different values of alpha correspond to different frequencies and size of the jump. The figures at the bottom illustrate several realizations of stochastic system. Compared with the deterministic trajectories, we now observe a random fluctuation around the stable states. And occasionally, sufficient large perturbation may push the system toward another Bayesian of attraction. This stochastic behavior is exactly what motivates our probabilistic definition of stability. Instead of asking where a transition is possible, we ask how likely such transition occurs. Okay, having introduced stochastic perturbation, we can now investigate how the stability of the force depends on the characteristic of environmental noise. And these slides present one of the main results obtained using the stochastic Bayesian of attraction. The three panels illustrate how the size and location of stochastic Bayesian change under different types of noise. Instead of focusing on individual trajectories, we examine the probability that the system remains instead the Bayesian associated with the forest state. Several interesting conclusions emerge from such an application of Bayesian of attraction. First, the stability of forest depends not only on the overall noise intensity, but also of the statistical properties of random perturbation. In particular, different combination of jump size and jump frequencies produces very different stability landscape. You can see here the blue one. First, these two figures, these two figures, escape probability, how we define the first Bayesian, this small probability to escape, and second figures, how we join initial condition with high probability to return to Bayesian of attraction. Here we are establishing as in confident interval level that we want. What does it mean? Small, it can to be established 0.2, 0.3, and of course Bayesian will change the length. And blue one is the application of the first criterion, and red one is additional initial condition with high probability to return to this Bayesian. They will change depend on level of small probability to escape and large probability to return to such a Bayesian. One important observation is that frequency perturbation, even when each perturbation is relatively small, can substantially increase the probability of transition from forest state to savanna state. On the other hand, some combination of noise parameters produces much large stochastic Bayesian, indicating that the forest remains comparatively robust despite environmental variability. This result demonstrates that the nature of stochastic forcing is just as important as its magnitude. Therefore, when assessing ecological resilience, it is not sufficient to measure only the variance of environmental fluctuation. We must also understand how this fluctuation modify the geometry of stochastic Bayes. This naturally leads to broader question. What have we learned from developing stochastic Bayesian framework? Let me briefly summarize the first part of my talk about stochastic Bayesian of attraction such a structure. The first contribution in this introduction of new probabilistic measure of stability. Instead of describing stability only through the deterministic Bayesian of attraction, we define stability using escape probability. Second, we establish quantitative criteria for determining size of stochastic Bayesian. It makes possible to compare the robustness of different metastable states under various types of stochastic perturbation. And third, contribution is conceptual. The stochastic Bayesian is not simply another numerical quantity. It represents an important geometric object that describes how randomness reshapes the landscape of dynamical system. Finally, we demonstrate that this framework can be applied successfully to realistic ecological models such as Amazon rainforest state. Before moving on, let me briefly mention a publication that was based somehow related to metastable state to stochastic Bayesian of attraction. This almost most of the paper was published in my PhD time, 2013-17. We start with introducing stochastic Bayesian of attraction for metastable state, looking for three well potential, one symmetric, one asymmetric, and two asymmetric state. Here we applied and broadness, not just escape probability, but mean exit time. Introduce as well concept of stochastic Bayesian of attraction, looking for mean exit time in second paper. And here we have two cases of application, Amazonian vegetation and well-known thermohaline circulation stability. Okay, to move for the second talk of the earlier warning signal, I would like to ask the question. Stochastic Bayesian of attraction, geometric quantity to quantify stability. Questions? I'm taking the questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, but related to your Amazon forest model, why do you need this discontinuity? Is it kind of crucial? Because biologically, I can't see the justification. But mathematically, do you really need this discontinuity?
Discontinuity, you know, for us, it was interesting how we choose this model. It was in one publication, previous publication, it was deterministic system, and such a publication discussed the new notion of Bayesian of stability for such a system with difficulty to find the initial condition. It's for deterministic one, they introduced new notion of how we can calculate Bayesian of stability for deterministic system, new idea. And we took this model, why we choose. In ecological aspect, for us, it not was the question. We are mathematicians, we applied mathematician. For us, it was the new. Discontinuous vector field, new mathematical intense problem. How to deal with such discontinuity, non-smoothness. We didn't worry about ecological aspect. Or, yeah, exists equation in previous publication, well-known work. We have such a system, describe rainforest that published already. Exists such a model. Yeah, exists such a model, and for us as a mathematician, it was really. And for me, I started to work in non-smooth dynamical system, and for me, it was like challenge. What I will do with such sliding mood in which we don't have uniqueness and just we have three solutions from there. This like interesting math question.
Yes, so stepping back, one way to describe, maybe to describe what you've done is that you point out that this different kinds of noise distributions potentially lead to different behaviors. And you looked at one family, the levy. Have you looked or considered what others might look like? And this idea that merely knowing the variance or of the noise is not enough to describe its effect on the ecological or system.
Just change. You know, in this publication, we focus just on such a type of noise, but we apply changing different description of the noise in another system. We changing from like, let's say, additive, because if you look here, we have two jump process. It's not completely V, yeah, pure jump process, changing the parameter epsilon and alpha. But in another publication, yeah, we are focused on the system in which we have different additive, multiplicative noise, changing different type of parameters. But for this work, after introducing stochastic Bayesian, it was just the focus. We didn't explore more this exact system for the different parameter of noise.
So I noticed in these time series that the forest cover goes negative, which you're interested in the math, not the ecology, and that's totally fine with me. I can get on board with that. But it made me think, does your method rely on there being no absorbing state?
Exactly. This is the good, wonderful question when we submit your publication. It was the first question of referee. What does it mean? Because after we avoid, for the such system, we avoid negative ones. But here makes sense because, you know, let me introduce. I'm from Cape Verde. I'm Cape Verdean. I lived in Cape Verde for several years, sub-Saharan Africa, and you know that exist types of the trees that hibernated, they for a long time, for 20 years, they are dry, but then when rain appears, they start to grow. And this like negative one is hibernation. We introduced that in Turkey because you know, it was the last publication when we have the answer. How we will answer this question when we have this negative tree? What does it mean when time hibernating? But for tree it's easy, but for the population, growth population, this negative one, no how. Then we put exactly because what we can do, we instead of additive noise, we can put multiplicative noise to avoiding exactly some part of multiplicative one that we did. My student tomorrow will represent the system. We was careful. This was our first question to face. Yeah, meaning no, but this look how good question. Hibernated.
Larissa, just to mention, you have a bit more than 10 minutes in total.
So the question stroke comment. So your Amazonian model, which is lovely. When I stuck my hand up earlier, I said, what was your G? You said it was constant. But we've used similar models looking at cocoa farming in Africa, where our G was seasonally dependent. So it modeled the effect of rainfall and solar temperature and so on. And then you get this lovely interplay of the variation in the G with everything else. So I throw that up as something to have a look at.
But you know, right now, like Connect, you know, you explore for 3 years, for 4 years, you're working in non-smooth dynamical system, vibro impact system. My question right now, I would like to apply non-smooth dynamical system in climate.
But you know, you can do it. I'm just saying, you can take your model and make it even more interesting by making your G periodic. And you have additional fun dynamics to look at.
Yeah.
If you want to look at some fun maths.
Yeah. Okay, let me go to the second one. 10 minutes, let's bring up in the 10 minutes. And okay, earlier warning signal. We apply. Right now, we are looking for the in second part of the work was motivated by Arctic under ice phytoplankton blooms, where the rapid environmental transition occurred in very short time scale and where traditional earlier warning methods often fail. This challenge motivates us to develop a new geometric approaches, starting work with such a model. Over the past several decades, Arctic sea ice has become thinner and the melting season has become longer as a consequence of climate change. As the ice becomes thinner, more sunlight penetrates through the ice and reaches the upper ocean. At the same time, the melting ice produces a layer of fresh water at the surface. This reduces vertical mixing and keeps the plankton suspended in the well-light upper layer of ocean. These two processes together create ideal conditions for rapid phytoplankton growth beneath the sea ice. As a result, large blooms may develop with only a few days. From ecological perspective, these blooms play an important role because they represent beginning of the Arctic marine food web. However, they can also become harmful. Alga blooms producing toxin that threaten marine ecosystem and fisheries. Therefore, one of the major scientific challenges is not simply to understand why these blooms occurs, but to predict when the rapid transition from low bloom state to a bloom state is likely to happen. From the viewpoint of dynamical system, this again a problem of metastability. The ecosystem may remain in low biomass state for a long period of time before making a sudden transition to a bloom state under environmental fluctuations. Traditionally, traditionally, earlier warning signals are based on the concept of critical slowing down. The idea is well known. As the system approaches to critical transition, its recovery from small perturbation becomes slow. This slowdown causes observable statistical changes such as increase in variance or autocorrelations. These indicators have been successfully applied in many ecological and climate studies. However, Arctic under ice bloom represent very different situations. The first difficulty is that bloom often develop extremely rapid. Instead of involving over months and years, they may appear within only a few days. This level very limited time for statistical indicators to accumulate enough information. Second problem is the presence of strong environmental noise. Instead of analyzing time series and statistics, our main question, can we obtain earlier warning indicators directly from geometry of the stochastic dynamical system? This question becomes the starting point of our research.
It looks like we are live. Might as well start. So let's introduce ourselves. This is Global Dispatches.
Discontinuity in the audio.
It's the main.
Okay, let us discuss a little bit deterministic model. The model was originally proposed by Sergey with his PhD student and Al-Sulami. Of course, we are collaborators. We look for the common systems. One, we have deterministic model. Why we're not looking for adding noise and explore this. And it captures the interaction between two important variables. The first variable is the upper ocean temperature, which determines the environmental condition beneath the sea ice. The second variable is the plankton blooms, which represent the amount of microscopic algae present in upper ocean. The two variables influence each other through several feedback mechanisms. Okay, let me discuss parameters quickly. Yeah, you can see these two. We have two states. One is blooming state, low biomass background state, and high biomass background state. And parameter is set it up. The first group of parameters controls the energy balance of the upper ocean. The second group controls the biological processes. These parameters determine how quickly phytoplankton grows, how sensitive it is to temperature, and how rapidly biomass is lost through mortality or grazings. Let's discuss right now stochastic framework. What kind of noise we added, why type such a noise. For the temperature equation, we introduce additive noise, as you can see. Additive noise. And for the plankton, we add multiplicative noise. This means that magnitude of the fluctuation depends on the current blue biomass. Ecologically, this is natural to exist ecological meaning to add such a noise. I don't have time to discuss ecological framework for such a biomass, but right now is the question that we preserve for the growth of the plankton is positive. Yeah, positive framework for the plankton. Our question here, again, to look how stable the state against of such a perturbation. And again, we describe here the Fokker-Planck equation as in our previous talk that we will use for the calculation of our main quantities. Let's discuss here in the figure that presents stochastic bifurcation diagram. The black curves correspond to the deterministic equilibria. The solid branch represents stable equilibria, while the dashed branch corresponds to the unstable saddle, separating two stable states. The colored curves show the behavior of stochastic system for different noise intensities. Instead of plotting deterministic equilibria, we now plot the expected stationary biomass. Several important observations can be made from such a picture. First, the deterministic basin structure remains visible even after stochastic perturbations are introduced. However, the sharp deterministic transitions become smoother. Second, as the noise intensity increases, transitional region become broader. This reflects the fact that randomness allows trajectories to move between the two stable states even before the deterministic tipping point is reached. Therefore, noise does not eliminate biostability. Instead, it transforms deterministic stability into metastable state, where transitions occurs with finite probability. This probabilistic interpretation will become increasingly important in the next part of the presentation.
Would be great if you could go to your final slide.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Every time I cannot, maybe I have to start with the second part instead to introduce all of basis of attraction. This last work is really very nice work, very informative work, and I would like to discuss because this paper was submitted to publication and we have referred to letters, and with these large and experienced people to work in stochastic and deterministic system, it will be a good discussion even to have more opinions about such earlier warning indicators. But let me first give. We introduce thickness of the layer, transitional layer between two metastable states. Such a thickness use the two probabilistic quantities, commutative function and stochastic separatrix. Then we average. Then we, through such a boundary, along of such a boundary, we average such a thickness using such an integral, averaged one. And then you can see, depend on thickness of such a boundary, we can see where is the process close to the dangerous place to the switch to another boundary. It was our geometric approach to quantify how close to the danger boundary our process are.
Okay.
Then,
I think
yeah.
we really have to stop. And so maybe if you have some main
if you have
questions, would you
questions
like
and
to ask
be
them? Or...
interested in see how we apply such a, and here we have the as well the main idea is to connect this such a geometry. Look, this geometric temporal scaling. This was the answer for the question. We have connected from this formula, this interesting thing, geometric temporal. I'm done.